Hi and welcome to a podcast of Social Media Basics. This is the pre-event podcast for the CIPR Scotland social media training taking place in Glasgow next week. If you're listening to this, the odds are you're coming along to that. Thanks very much, and the CIPR appreciates your support. It's going to be quite an interesting half day. Hopefully everyone will learn quite a lot out of it. But the point of this is just to make sure we're all coming at it from the same level, from the same benchmark, and so that there's no surprises and no one's having to go, excuse me, what's a Hootsuite? How do I tweet deck? What's an RSS? So, well, most of this will probably be familiar to you all, though I do hope there's at least some good tips in it to justify the next half hour of your time. The idea, as I say, is just to make sure that everyone knows, all the same stuff going in, and it's a level playing field. So with that, let's kick off. And why social media? This is something that's asked by companies and organisations continuously, and it's a growing communications platform. I believe that the death of traditional media has been overhyped, but you can't deny that when there's more than 1 billion people using something, it may have some legs and some staying power and be a way of reaching people. And this is what you have to look at. Facebook in particular, just under 600 million users as we speak, and by the end of 2011 they're saying there'll be 1 billion users, or 1 billion accounts at least, on that platform alone. So there's definitely something there. There's a chance for brands and organisations to find people interested in them, to set up little communities who are interested in their message or want to be more involved with them. It's great for raising awareness of your brands and products. Obviously great for marketing and PR then, but similarly also fantastic in a crisis scenario because you can get your message out there direct to people. You're not relying on the press. It's between you and the people affected, which can be fantastic, and it can be a fantastic two-way process because you can learn more then quickly too. And who does it? Well, everyone does it now. This survey is based on some US statistics, but in the UK it's very, very similar. In fact, in the UK, the quickest growing group at the moment is older boomers and seniors. So not only now do you have to worry about your mum following you on Facebook, you have to worry about your gran and great-gran following you on Facebook. But the point being, lots of people are doing it, and even though lots of people are creating, they're writing blogs or tweeting, the vast majority are more passive. They're consuming instead of creating. So that's something to bear in mind. And it may be that just because you don't see a lot of people writing about your company or product, there may be a lot of people looking at it at the same time. Something to bear in mind. Scotland is in the digital age, and so it should be. We invented the telephone, so that's only fair. We have a huge growth gaming industry, and key components of the iPod were developed in Scotland as well. So this is it's something we should definitely be part of. Sadly, from a social media perspective, it's not been the quickest of adoptions. Even if you look at newspapers now, the digital press in Scotland is the press going digital in Scotland is struggling. If you look on Twitter, there's a Scotland account that's owned by someone and not used. Facebook.com/Scotland, instead of being owned by the Tourist Board or the government, is owned by Callum McWhirr, and fair play to him. It's a nice little advertisement for his company, so fair play Callum. However, it's not all doom and gloom in Scotland. There's just under 1/3 Facebook accounts. There's just over 46,000 Twitter accounts. There's a healthy amount of blogging. It's not ubiquitous, but there are blogs. There's about 150 political blogs alone. There's a lot of music blogs. There's some business blogs. So there's foodie blogs. Scotland has quite a considerable amount of foodie blogs, which is a good thing. And everywhere except for Glasgow is ahead of the UK average for digital engagement or access to digital services. And Freeview is normally excluded from that. That normally means the amount of people who can get a good broadband service. Aberdeen, Edinburgh in particular are ahead of the UK average. Glasgow is considerably behind. In fact, a couple of years ago, a project was run in the city to give lots of lower class people laptops to use to try and encourage them to get online. And what actually happened was the laptops were either sold or stolen or traded. So not the best project, but there's hope yet, and it's fair to say that Scotland does accept that digital can play a large part in its future. But for those of you wanting to use social media, the first things have to be considered before you even get near a keyboard. And I always say it's important. The main thing you must do before setting out on social media is know your goals. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because everybody else is doing it? If so, not the best reason to be getting involved. Do you have a usage policy? Who can go online for you? Who's coordinating the efforts? Who's making sure the content is proper and correct? And as I've said, know your goals. What's a win for you? Are you wanting people to buy your product right away? Are you just looking for engagement? Are you just wanting to see what people are saying about you? And how will you do it? Will you be on Facebook? Will you have a blog? Will you be on Twitter? Will you be on Vimeo? Will you podcast? Will you just be broadcasting only, or will you be broadcasting and engaging? There's a lot of variables to consider there. And sadly, you're still not online because you have to check with HR to see if this is all allowed. If there's anything in contracts that say you can't do it, do contracts have to be changed so that people can do it? Check with IT to make sure you're not opening up any security concerns here. Many places still block Facebook and Twitter and so on. Some of it from a productivity point of view, and some of it actually from a safety point of view, security point of view. So you have to consider these things. Similarly, you need usage policies, as we've mentioned. One for staff, so they know what they can do, can't do. If a crisis happens, who do they come to? If there's a negative comment, what can they do? What can they say? And one to place online, just to let people know that you are there, and to an extent, here are your rules of engagement. Similarly, you also need to stress to your staff to keep their personal and work accounts apart. It may be one thing to put a cheeky or risky comment from one person to another when you're posting it as yourself. It may look completely different if you're the Bank of Scotland and you're tweeting to someone, "Hey gorgeous, what are you doing on Friday night?" So, again, lots of people, because it is very comfortable and very casual mediums, people think they can be casual, but they have to have professionalism. Now, here's what we're going to look at, and again, as I say, we'll just be touching on these things. We're going to have a look at email, website, blogs, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Vimeo, so that's online video, podcasting, a little bit of geolocation, a bit of mobile, a bit of apps, a quick look at social media newsrooms and news releases, search engine optimization, RSS syndication, URLs, QR codes, and a quick touch on Google Alerts and online ads. Don't worry, it may seem a lot, but as I say, we're just touching on things here so everyone's got an idea of the basics. Email. You may be thinking, hang on, what's that got to do with anything? It's still a very, very popular medium digitally. It's the second most popular form of communication globally. Text messaging is the winner there. It's fast, it's inexpensive, but it's still treated, it's casual and disposable. We'll remember the recent row involving Hugh Dallas, and that comes back to talking about, acceptable use policies and so on. But email is still powerful. It's a great way of cultivating contacts. The PRs listening to this will accept, one of the strongest tools you have is your PR database, your list of people. And success of Groupon, the bulk discount buying email, is proof that email still has a place. Websites, like email, are, for many, ubiquitous and have been about, in terms of digital forever. It's the first port of call for most generations on a web. If you hear about a company, you hit Google, Bing, Yahoo, or whatever your search engine is, and you go and look up a website. You normally go and look up the company or the person's own website. Website gets you a strong ranking in Google. It's the first port of call. And if you don't have a website, lots of people wonder why you exist. Or if they're looking to buy something and they can't find you, they'll just go and look at one of your competitor sites. And many, unfortunately, in 2011 are still very heavily Flash based. Flash is a piece of software that develops video and graphics, and it has its uses, but it doesn't help you get found in Google or the other search engines, and we'll come back to that later on. Some tips for websites. I've mentioned Flash there. If possible, don't use it. Flash doesn't show on an iPod Touch, doesn't show on an iPhone, doesn't show on an iPad, doesn't show on a lot of things. So if you're wanting to reach as many people as possible, don't have Flash or minimize Flash on your site. Also, don't just have huge dumps of text. Break things up with headers and images. It may not be formatted like a newspaper, but still think the same way. Give the eye plenty to look at so it doesn't get bored. If you want to look quite sophisticated, leave out http://www. when advertising your website address. The example there's flash.com, and the reason for this is the .com tells people that it's a web address, so you don't need the rest of it. And capitalise up your first letters can make it look just that little bit more professional, a little bit more smart. And as we'll keep coming back to, regular fresh content. Give people a reason to keep coming back to your website. After all, you wouldn't buy the same newspaper day in, day out. You may buy the same title of newspaper, but the content's different. So a website should be the same. And blogs are a great way of doing that. It's an easy and it's a very personal way of updating a website. Whereas the majority of your website may have to be very corporate, some would say stuffy. A blog lets you put personality into a site. It's a great way of engaging with an audience on topical issues. You can have more than one. If you're a large law firm, you can have one for house buying, you can have one for wills, you can have one for corporate law, everything. You can have one for criminal law. There's lots there. WordPress and Blogger are two of the more established and more popular platforms. WordPress in particular is very good for search engine optimization. Blogger is owned by Google, and lots of people think that gives them a slight advantage, though it's never been stated to be the case. Posterous is very much a blogging for beginners, but it's very good. Basically what you do is you email your blog to Posterous with your subject heading and any pictures you want included in the blog in the email body, and Posterous just converts it. It's really nice, really simple, a great way of dipping your toes in, and again, the content is what shines through. Some tips for doing blogs though. It's one thing to go, oh, I've got a blog, and thinking that's it. No, you need to keep doing it constantly. So to that end, set up an editorial calendar. See where you've got gaps, or see what big events are coming up that you can blog about. Just give yourself a sort of editorial plan. Use the more function. This basically means don't dump all your blog posts on your front page of either your website or your blog. Just put up a paragraph, and then use most blogs give you the facility for a more button to be inserted, and that means you read the first paragraph and then click more to go and read the rest of it in a second page. Now, there's many benefits there, including a slight one to SEO, but it's very, very useful in that it means someone can read a paragraph and go and read more, or their eye may catch something else on the page that's more to their interest. One great thing about blogs is it gives you a chance to mention lots of other people, and this is a good thing, because the more people you mention, you can go and tell them, they're on your blog, the more likely they are to go and read it. Think of it like the newspapers when they do the primary one pictures every August. If there's a kid in there that you'll buy it. The aunties will buy it, the mums, the dads, the great grannies will buy it. Whole families will buy copies of that newspaper just that one time that year because someone they know is mentioned in it. It's the same in blogs. If you mention people in a blog, let them know and they'll go and read it. But it's not just about your blog. You have to spend time on other blogs for a couple of reasons. One, it's good to get the links back to your own site, but also by being on other blogs, that lets people know your blog exists and they'll come and have a look at it. Blogging and a lot of social media is very much the opposite of Kevin Costner's whole "if you build it, they will come" from Field of Dreams. With social media and blogs and any sort of digital presence, you have to build it, but then you have to go and tell people about it. And that's why it's a very good, instead of talking about yourself all the time, it's good to mention other people and go to other people's sites because that makes it relevant to them. Facebook, similarly, every bit as ubiquitous for many online, and for many it is now actually the web. People just go on, do all their activities on Facebook and then come off, and that's it. They don't go and look at normal websites. It is just Facebook and that's it. It is so popular and powerful now that Facebook results will show up in Google and Bing. That shows up in the search engine results. It's the most popular social media platform and will be throughout 2011 at least. And it also spawned social gaming, which we'll come back to later on. But that's the likes of Facebook and Mafia Wars and so on. And if you're using Facebook, one thing that's quite essential as an individual is have your privacy settings properly done. It can be a bit tricky. Facebook's not the most user-friendly in this sense, but it's well worth doing. Similarly, complete your profile. Show you're serious about being there. And similarly, let people know what kind of page it is. Is it a page purely for your work? Is it a personal page? Kate Trussler, the Edinburgh-based PR operative, she has a personal Facebook page for friends and she has a professional Facebook page for work. And that's perfectly fair. And again, check it 2 or 3 times a day. If you're serious about it, people may update it or put material on there at certain times that will either engage you or be directly to you that it might be worth you knowing. So you have to check these things on a regular basis. The other thing in Facebook, of course, though, is Facebook pages, which are very good for brands, corporations, and other large organisations. So there's some tips there that can be handy, including the fact that Facebook users are 7 times more likely to watch video. Now, it's video on Facebook, or in the Facebook site, so you have to have it on there. But they're 7 times more likely to watch a video than other web users. Facebook is also now more popular than Flickr for viewing photographs, so make sure you've got pictures you can put up there. Pick a landing page. Some people still don't realise you can do this. Instead of just always coming to the wall, or what's known as the Facebook wall, you can have them land at the About page, or you can create another page, and we'll show you how to do that at the session. But you can pick where people go and what they see first. If you're a restaurant, you might want to have them turn up at your reviews page first. Things like that can make all the difference. And always allow for your content plus others to be seen. Lots and lots of places make the mistake of just having their content that appears. Let others appear as well. That shows that it's a social site. That shows it's dynamic. It shows you're engaging and interacting. Now, LinkedIn is being called by many Facebook for grown-ups. It's the more serious face of social networking. It's about work, it's about business, but it's also very popular, and it's a quick way of people evaluating you. People can go on there now and skim through your details, like an online CV, see what others are saying about you. Some people use it now instead of references, and something that may be of interest to you, 65% of people on it are in a household which brings in more than £65,000 a year. So, it's very much earners who are on LinkedIn, or people who want to be earners who are on LinkedIn. Again, some basic tips include having the full profile, give recommendations to others, and don't be shy about asking people to recommend you. And Facebook also has Facebook groups, which is a great way of going, building up a network of people local to you. And one thing to check out though is check what groups you're on. Marketing people especially make this great mistake of just being on marketing groups, which is very good. It's great to swap, the knowledge, get a chat. LinkedIn's not really gossipy, but you do get some information. But go elsewhere, because the people all reading the marketing groups are marketeers, PRs, and that sort. You won't get a lot of business just by being there. You might want to be in the legal groups, the accountancy groups, the police groups, any sort of groups where you think you might get business. So, always spread yourself out a little past your own comfortable niche. Twitter, world's most second popular micro-messaging platform after SMSing and texting. It's, online events using hashtags can draw lots of people. They can come on and read it, they can engage, they can participate. It has clout, and strangely enough, clout's one of the tools used by many to judge influence. But it's also used by the press. Because it's public, the press have no fears in just going and taking a chat. And if you're a wannabe MP, like Stuart McClellan found out earlier this year, that can work against you. But for some, Stephen Fry's seen a whole new lease of life on the back of it. It's certainly kept his profile high in the mainstream press. Some quite simple tips. Keep your tweets to 120 characters. That's so that you make it easy for others to retweet you. Respond to every message you get, as long as it's not spam, of course. 60% of people still use the main Twitter web interface, and that's not getting the best out of it. We'll cover this more at the session, but Hootsuite, TweetDeck, CoTweet, MarketMe Suite, These are all fantastic tools and let you use Twitter a lot more efficiently. Schedule your tweets. Obviously you don't want to be jumping onto Twitter every 5 minutes to see what's happening or posting updates. So schedule your tweets. Spend 20 minutes in the morning spreading tweets out during the day that are going to be informative and useful. And then for the rest of the day, be like a smoker. Take little 5-10 minute breaks, jump onto Twitter and come off again. And if you actually know any ex-smokers, involve them in your social media program, because studies have shown that smokers' brains have adapted over the years and that they're very good at taking micro breaks and then going back to their main focus of work. So you could have them do the tweeting in the morning and then jump in and out without any big hit to their productivity, whereas other people can stop one project, go onto Twitter. Takes them a bit of time to get back into the main flow of things. And use hashtags. Hashtags are a great way of getting feedback and to see what people are saying. You'll see we've got one here, hashtag CIPRSM, obviously CIPR social media. Online video, equally as important in the 21st century. It's incredible the amount that's out there, and as always there's good and bad. YouTube uploads 24 hours of video every minute of the day. Now that's a phenomenal amount. There's also Vimeo, which is seen as a more corporate, more polished YouTube. Some people also say its HD video looks a little bit better than YouTube's, but these guys are constantly tweaking and refining their processes. And instead of worrying about just putting it on one or two of them, you can use things like TubeMogul or HeySpread to get to all the video sites. And I do apologise for that shockingly bad typo there. If anyone finds another one in this, let me know and we'll give a prize on the day. I would like to say that was deliberate for that reason, but it's not. So I do apologise. But video, just because you can do it, doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. With your little phone. iPhones, Android phones, lots of phones now have cameras. Flips and Kodaks also now have them, and you can get up to technically HD quality on them, but they're not going to be as good as a £5,000 Sony camera or a Red One. They do have their limitations. However, people will accept it as long as the content's good and it's not too wild in terms of imagery. As long as the camera's not constantly shaking about or being thrown about. A steady image, you'll be forgiven for a lot with that. The likes of Chris Brogan use video while driving in their cars and just sitting at airports. And the videos are short, so it's 2-3 minutes, and the content is good, so people forgive the other limitations of them. One of those limitations actually is sound. And what you'll find very quickly if you watch a lot of online video is that sound is very often neglected, and it's every bit as important, if not more important, in many cases, because people forgive bad video. They're a lot less forgiving of bad sound because you need to be able to hear what's being said. And also, if you've got good sound, and whether that's by a clip-on mic or something more expensive, a good wireless lapel mic, it means then you can use your audio elsewhere. You could rip it separately as an MP3, for example. Talking of MP3s, podcasting is a continuing growth area. People do like it. There's podcasts for everything out there. Even in Scotland, there's a lot of football podcasts, science fiction podcasts, cult TV podcasts for everything. And it's a great way of showing expertise and authority. And it's really worth encouraging. It doesn't take a lot. The barriers to entry are low. You can just sit with a laptop and speak into the mic, or you can buy an external mic for it, or even just use an application called Audioboo, which can be done through a computer or through a phone. And that records up to just 5-minute sound bites. And again, that can be enough. That's you podcasting by doing that. Some simple tips, again, that make things a lot more fun and more interesting for you and your listeners. Have more than one person on your show or your broadcast. Have guests as well. Keeps it fun. Don't just go onto iTunes. Also make sure that you have an RSS feed independent of iTunes, because even though it's the most popular sort of place for people to find podcasts, there are others, and you don't want to miss anyone out. Like we spoke about with blogging, have a publishing and editorial schedule. Bring it out every Monday, bring it out fortnightly. Just let people know when they can expect it, and then it becomes part of their routine. There's a lot of people. Whiskey Cast is an example of this. It's a popular whiskey podcast, and people expect that on a Wednesday night. And if it's not there, the show creators get emails going, "Hang on, where's the show?" And you may think, well, that's a bit anal, but for a lot of people, it's like a TV show. It's like Coronation Street. It's like Doctor Who. They expect it at a certain time, and they like it so much that they work it into their lives. So it's worth having a schedule. Similar, don't read from a script and try to be natural. It's one thing to quote little bits, but don't quote pages and pages. This is not the place to be reciting Ulysses, for example. Just, if you've got a little bit to say, but again, try and vary it. Vary your pitch so that it doesn't seem as you just reading a couple of words off a press release. And hang on while I turn the page. It makes it dull. And I know I've done it here, but I'm going to kid on that's deliberate to stop you guys pirating this about. Avoid saying a lot if you can. It's just, again, it's about sounding professional, sounding confident, sounding as if you know what you're actually saying. One thing, podcasting's been about that for quite a while now, but one thing that's new on the scene is the rise of tablets. And mobiles also, to an extent, as computers. Mobiles have been able to do a lot, but it's only in the last couple of years that they've really developed as portable computers. And there's generations now who use their mobile as their main computer. There's a reason these phones are called smartphones. They can do everything. It may not be as comfortable as typing on a laptop, but they can do everything. And in India, the PC has been bypassed as whole generations go onto the mobile. And you can see it here as well. Lots of people don't buy the latest, fastest computers anymore. They'll perhaps have a PlayStation for their games and a phone doing the rest of their stuff. The tablet industry is not even a year old, and already over 40 million tablets have been sold. It's phenomenal. The point being of both, people are now used to computing on the move, and in part this means people are quite happy broadcasting their details. People don't see it as giving a lot of way just to say that they're at Starbucks or they're at the pub or they're at work. They just see it as sharing. But there's a growth industry around it. Facebook Places, Gowalla and Foursquare are all apps which basically trade on you saying where you are and what you're doing. And if you're going to encourage this market or be involved in it, have apps, not just for the iPhone obviously, but also for Android and BlackBerry. People think BlackBerry's a distant loser in the iPhone Android race, but it's not. It's still in there, especially obviously with corporates. And people are doing this for fun or just to let people know what they're up to. For some people it's a step too far in intimacy and giving things away. Others see it just as a bit of fun. From a marketing PR point of view, it can be used, it can be gamed, handy to have, and again we'll cover that at the full session. SMNR is a buzz phrase around what's basically a multimedia press release in many ways. Social media news release, social media newsroom does sound a bit better though. And as you can see from the page there, it basically is a press release with extra details. It's all on one page. That Weller release has 3 pictures with it. If they had wanted, they could have also included video and audio. There's details to the side, relevant facts, and the main news release in the middle. There's a bit up the top that says who to contact. It's all there, and that means if you send that out to someone, you're not going to get the phone call back from the journalist saying, "Oh, have you got video? Have you got audio? Have you got this? Have you got that?" It's all there. It's a complete package. And that's fantastic because we have to remember in this day and age, people don't just want the words. If you can give them video, they'll embed it in their site. If you give them pictures, they'll use them in their sites or in their publications. It's fantastic. It's a great way of doing things. It's slightly overhyped, but it can be a very useful tool. PitchEngine.com is by far, in my opinion, the best one out there. That's where this Wella one comes from. I use it quite a bit for certain clients. And, they let you put everything up, video, words, pics, audio, and it's great. You just can't go wrong with it. And always remember as well, though, these things are searched by search engines, so there's an SEO element, and make sure your key phrases, your key messages are there, and make it a good press release. SEO, we've mentioned quite a bit here, and stands for Search Engine Optimization. It's what search engines see. You just see the words on the main part of a website. Google and so on can see so much more than that. And it's basically the key way, or one of the key ways, of being on page one of Google or Bing. And that's where you want to be, because very few people click past those first 10 results. Some people don't even go past the first 5. But what it means is that every word in your site, every picture, they all have a power. And that is a power you can harness to help get further up the rankings. And it can be slightly technical, there's no denying this. Even if you have a quick look at that graphic there, it shows, there's elements there. It's work. It's not just as easy as, okay, here's all my favourite phrases at the top of a story. Brilliant, I'll be number 1 tomorrow. There's a bit more to it than that, and we'll cover it in greater depth next week. But at the same time, these 2 graphics, I've got some tips, and the most obvious sort of things are never have click this or click here, because that's losing out on a chance for good keyword linkage. If you're, say for example, you're doing a report and it was important to you to be ranking for the weather in Scotland, if you had published a report on the weather in Scotland, do it like that. Say, please come to our site to read our report on the weather in Scotland, and have the weather in Scotland as a clickable link. Headings are important. We've already mentioned that you should have headings in your pages anyway to break up the flow of text. The way the search engine works, headings are deemed more important than normal text, so make sure you have keywords there. And again, make sure in your title section of web pages and in your actual web page addresses that you have your keywords. Very often people just let whatever the default practice is for websites, especially in WordPress, people let it just throw up random names and numbers or just dates. Don't do that. Specify it so that you're in control and the right words appear that you want. And obviously think of what your headings and subject titles will be there then. Forgive the bad graphic. I couldn't think of anything that was actually relevant to URLs, and lots of people say it is URLs anyway, so there's a little bit of geography for you. It's the basic web address. You know what it is. Always have relevant words where possible, and have Facebook names grabbed as well for the very same reasons. And it's a case of, even though you may have a company name that's not overly relevant, that doesn't mean you can't have pages that are, let's say for example, your company is called Bamboozle. You could be bamboozle.com/social media, bamboozle.com/how to use Twitter, bamboozle.com how to rank high in Facebook. These things all help you in the rankings, and it tells people what the page is about. One thing that can also help is URL shorteners. Bitly is the most popular, but there's also Owly. Google's just brought one out, and there's many more. And these can be a great way of owning a couple of domain names, because if you have bit.ly/whiskey, for example, or bit.ly/Scotland, no one else can use that, and that link will always be associated with your content. And the more people spread that out there, that's, for example, the word Scotland being associated with your content. QR codes, these are something that keep threatening to go mainstream and then always seem to pull themselves back. They're, as you can see, just a little graphic, and if you scan them with a smartphone that's got the right software installed, then it can take you to a website, it can take you to video, it can take you to whatever you specify it to be. And there's great uses for this. If you're a wine company, for example, imagine having one of these on each label. If someone scans it, it takes them to a video giving you the tasting notes for that wine. If you're looking at a property in an estate agent's brochure, you scan that and it takes you to video of the property and the schedule. It's a nice little tool. As I say, it's one of those that keeps threatening to break through to the mainstream and doesn't always. One which hasn't made it to the mainstream but is very popular in techie circles is RSS, which is basically a syndication feed. And what happens with RSS is you have an application for RSS, Google Reader being the most popular one. You click on the RSS button on a site, and what happens after that is that Google Reader is then sent the updates whenever that website updates. Now you may be wondering what the benefit to that is, but if you like to go to a lot of websites regularly, say you have all the Scottish news sites, Scottish sports sites, some English news sites, international news sites. Instead of every day having to go and type the web addresses in or go through all your bookmarks to see these sites, you go to your RSS reader, and if you've put the RSS links in, it pulls them all down for you and you can see it all in one space. It's very convenient, great way of saving time, but there's still this belief out there that's highly technical and highly tricky, and it's not. It's something that's very, very good. It's also very useful, and if you have a site, make sure you get offer RSS as an option. Online advertising is also very, very popular. Everyone remembers recently that BP spent more than $1 million on Google ads because of the Deepwater Horizon crisis. They're a cheap way of getting attention. They can be used in creative ways. We've heard of people who bought a couple of names of company directors and then used that banking on the fact that the company director would Google themselves, and when the company director did, the first thing they saw was a note from this chap saying, "Hello, I'd like to work with you," and people have been hired because of that. But one thing to always remember with advertising, very few people talk about adverts the same way they talk about other content. Apart from the dairy milk advert with the monkey, I can't remember the last time I spoke to anyone about an advert, so it's very similar online. Would you rather spend your money there, or would you rather spend it on creating fresh content that people may share and talk about? Obviously, if you've got the budget, you can do both, but if you have to pick one or the other, I would always say go with the content. But it may differ for you, but also think, how often do you actually click on an advert? Online buying and selling is something we'll also touch on. eBay is very well known. We've touched on Groupon as well, and these things are only set to grow. Major stores and companies are now on eBay. Large hotels use Groupon to fill rooms when they've got quiet periods. Lots of places take PayPal now as a payment, and Facebook credits is going to follow. And also, with the growth in what's known as NFC technology, which is pretty much like Oyster cards but in your phone, we're going to see, within the next 18 months in the Western European hemisphere, people using their phones to pay for things as well, taking us one step further from chip and pin. Social gaming, we mentioned this earlier, it's huge. I'm sure everyone knows someone who's played it. It's games like Farmville, it's Mafia Wars. It's not iPhone and Wii games as much. They're casual gamers, not so much social gaming. The social element to these games is seen from sharing everything, but more and more games are now picking this up, and it's an incredible market. Farmville cost £50,000 to create. It now makes that money, perhaps not weekly, but not much more than that. It's been stated that the amount of tractors bought in Farmville in a month is more than the number of tractors bought globally each year. And that's an incredible statistic. And for companies, there's a lot of opportunities here, either just to get your message in or to actually create games and be part of this. Because again, with a lot of this content, if people are spending time with you and on you, it's time they're not spending with anybody else. And also, as most marketeers will tell you, the longer people spend with your brand, the more positive they're going to feel about it, and also the more likely they are to spend and buy from you. So here's where you really should be in 2011. If you're in London or California or New York, this is what your basics are, and it's a global platform, so Scotland shouldn't be any different. You should have your website, you should be on Wikipedia as well if possible, preferably not in WikiLeaks though. If relevant, have a blog, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, online video. Some will want all of them, some will want less. It's about each case being unique and working out what you actually want. Have an online store. If you're telling people how great your stuff is, at least give them a chance to be able to buy it. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, tell people that, but don't just put the logo up, actually put the address where people can find you. And be on podcasts, be on video. If you want to be a bit more extended in your involvement in 2011, create the podcast, create the video, treat the bloggers like press, you can treat them better if you want. It depends on what works for you. Respond to online comments. Don't just have the presence. Be engaging, be interacting. Have apps for phones and computers, online presentations, documents. Let people see things that be on Scribd. and SlideShare and so on. Put stuff out there that tells people what you do, how awesome you are, quite frankly. And lead, don't just commentate. It's easy enough to go, oh, I saw this today, or I saw that yesterday, but also put your thoughts out there and go, here's what we think. You can be fairly opinionated. And if you're advanced in 2011, you share your data. Some police forces do this. Governments are trying to open it up more and more. They're going, here, see what you can do with this. See what information you can do. If you're also advanced, mobile, you're as comfortable with the mobile now as you are with the web. Location-based information, again, ties in with mobile. There's a high level of transparency in what you do. There's external involvement. And this ties in with this idea that engagement is a core ethos across a company. Ford are the most commonly quoted example of this, and they are worth looking at for that very reason, and we'll touch on them at the actual event, and that will be next week. So thank you very much for your time. My contact details are there. If there's anything you really want to make sure gets covered in the training course, feel free to drop me an email or a tweet or send me a text, and we'll get it in there. And similarly, if you have any comments, any feedback about this, drop me a note. It's always great to know what you think. But that's all for just now, and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye now.